RH, quer saber como voar no trabalho? É só usar a Flash. Com a Flash, você concentra toda a gestão de pessoas em um único lugar. Faça a admissão dos colaboradores e solicite mais de 8 categorias de benefícios. Ah, e você ainda pode fazer todo o controle de ponto. Conheça o novo onboarding integrado da Flash em flashapp.com.br.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Insider Insights. I'm Benjamin Ensor, Director of Research and Strategy at 11FS. Now, week in, week out on Fintech Insider, we speak to founders and executives on the cutting edge of innovation in financial services. This week, we're spotlighting the regulatory framework that makes a lot of this innovation possible, at least in the UK. As the fintech sector tentatively rebounds from the economic shocks of the past few years, we want to discuss what regulators can do to supercharge innovation in the industry. So we are delighted to be speaking to Jessica Rusu, Chief Data, Information and Innovation Officer at the Financial Conduct Authority here in London, about regulating fintech in 2024 and looking back at the impact of 10 years of the Financial Conduct Authority's Innovation Hub. It's really great to have you on the show with us.
Thank you to have me. I'm really excited to talk about this subject. It's our favorite subject to talk about, innovation and growth.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So let's dive in. So what we want to dig into is, the first 10 years of innovation at the FCA. But before we kick off with a kind of retrospective looking back at all the things you've achieved, we think you've got some exciting news for us.
Yes, I do have some exciting news for you. I'm going to talk about the AI Lab. We're really excited to announce the work that we've been doing in that space.
What is the AI Lab?
So the AI Lab is comprised of 4 parts. Firstly, there's going to be the traditional sprints, and sometimes we do sprints on tech side. We will also be doing sprints on the policy side. Mm-hmm. So that's something we're looking forward to doing at the start of the year, getting off 2025 with a bang. We'll be looking at some policy sprints. So that's the first component. The second component of the AI Lab is going to be a spotlight. Now, what is the reason for doing this? Because we often do a showcase at the end of a tech sprint. But what we'll be doing with this spotlight or showcase day is allowing entrepreneurs and innovators to actually demonstrate some of the technology that they've been able to develop over the past year or so, because AI has come on a lot. And there are a lot of synergies between businesses, and they really enjoy the opportunity to collaborate. So that will be part of it. The third part of it is going to be around collecting AI input, so our AI input zone. Now, why do we do this? So regulators often ask for a call for input, or they issue some guidance, or they ask for feedback on a particular emerging bit of technology or policy, rather. And what we think is that because artificial intelligence is evolving so quickly, we want to do something a little bit more dynamic, something more collaborative, something that allows for academics, policymakers, peer regulators. And then finally is the supercharged sandbox. So the supercharged sandbox is a really important component, because what we do in the sandbox activities at the FCA, it's not just a talk shop. We do actual testing. We use synthetic data. We have real algorithms. Some of our recent sprints were super technical and super quantitative. And what we want to do is make sure that the AI sprints of the future are enabled with that supercharged processing power.
That sounds really, really interesting. I've got dozens of questions that I'd love to ask you on that, but we won't have time to go through all of them. But can you use superficial data? Sorry, that wasn't the right term. With AI, because surely if the data isn't true data, isn't there a danger of potentially misleading the AI, or the AI producing misleading results? Or?
Actually, we're very fortunate that we have over 333, possibly more, real data sets in our sandbox. And what we're able to do with the synthetic data is anonymize it appropriately. So, for example, if we're testing market order book data or we're looking at consumer transactions, we're able to anonymize it and pseudonymize it in the appropriate way to protect the underlying information, but it is real data in the sense that firms have the opportunity to genuinely test their solutions with the data.
Yeah, because that's what seems important, is having real data
Exactly.
to test it. So it sounds like artificial intelligence is going to be pretty central to the work that certainly you and your team will be doing, but maybe the FCA more widely over the next few years. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm pleased to say that we've actually been looking at this area for quite some time. So what's really important to think about is the wider economy, how we ensure financial services are able to adopt the technology safely whilst we are aware of the risks that are evolving. So it could be market abuse that we need to think about. It could be insider trading. It could be deep fakes and theft of consumer information. AI is also being used to scam consumers. And so what we want to do is make sure from both a policy perspective as well as a technology perspective that we are ready to enable the financial services for that future. And what we've been thinking about in terms of our policy approach is we are an outcomes-based regulator. We look for good consumer outcomes. We've spoke at length about the consumer duty and what firms need to do to protect consumers. What we don't want to do is create rules that won't evolve quickly enough with technology that might look good right now, but might not work for 9 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road. So in this particular space, this is why the AI lab is so important, because we want to both do things like look at market abuse and how we can use artificial intelligence to spot and stop harm sooner, but also consumer financial inclusion. Let's look at the upside benefits, and let's make sure that firms can adopt it in a way that's both safe and beneficial for growth.
Thank you. Must be quite a worry for regulators, not just here in the UK, but all around the world. I mean, the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence. There is that risk that, as you say, it outruns, not just specific individual regulations, but it almost starts to outrun, regulators' ability to react to it, because there has been such rapid change.
So we've been looking at proactive harm detection for a while. So this is something that, of course, you're going to always keep investing and upping your game. But in particular, we've been leveraging our web scraping tools for a period of time, and we've made a lot of technical enhancements to them over the course of the past year. This is where we look across websites. We're scraping over 100,000 per day, looking for scams and consumer harm and proactively shutting them down. And we're also helping firms with their suspicious activity detection systems, and they're looking to use artificial intelligence to really understand the connections between individuals, firms, entities, and bad actors at scale.
And where can firms that are listening to this and are interested in the AI lab, where can they find out more about it? Is that just sort of through the FCA?
Absolutely. So they can go and apply for more information right through the link on our website to the AI lab. We also, throughout the year, have an always-on regulatory sandbox and digital sandbox. So anytime a firm wants to test something, they can contact us. And the other great thing that has evolved over time for the FCA's innovation services is that we've evolved what I like to think of as almost a white glove service for the pre-authorization process. Firms often have questions. They want to understand the regulatory environment. They might not understand what they need to do to become authorized. And so our innovation pathway service provides that hand-holding and questions and answers and the ability to have all sorts of information and support. And some of the support also comes from, we have an innovation advisory panel, and those mentors are from the industry and other groups, and they support rising star fintechs and give them guidance and feedback, often on their business proposition, their business model, suggestions for what they can do to get VC and funding. And so the Innovation Pathways service really does a lot to help those firms on their pre-authorization journey.
Fantastic. So we've started looking forward to,
Yes.
the AI lab
Yeah.
and the future. But what we want to do now is sort of look back.
Yes.
Because this month, October, marks 10 years of the FCA's Innovation Hub. You told us a little bit about how the sort of the service has evolved over that time. But can you tell us maybe a little bit more about what the mission was back in 2014? Why did the FCA launch the Innovation Hub? What was the intent?
Yes, so we are very happy to say that FCA innovation is now 10 years old. So we're celebrating a decade of innovation. So the work started in 2014 in earnest with a very small team. That team has now scaled over time to an entire department focused on innovation services. The previous brand name for the department was FCA Innovate. Many people often track me down and talk about their experience with FCA Innovate over the years. It's been a fantastic brand for the FCA in terms of the support provided to firms. And you asked, what was the reason? It's really around supporting secondary competitiveness and growth, because our primary objectives are, market stability, keep consumers from harm, keep markets secure, and the competitiveness and growth objective is really part of that, and it's thinking about consumer financial inclusion as well as keeping pace with the trends that were starting to evolve at the time. As you know, the fintech industry was ascending at that point, and there was sort of a need to double-click into firms that were adopting those technologies and help them figure out how to be regulated and to grow on their journey. So we introduced FCA Innovate, and over time we gradually introduced the regulatory sandbox. So the regulatory sandbox is where firms had the opportunity to apply for a particular event. Some of those events could be consumer financial inclusion related, or diversity and inclusion, market stability, so different topics. And over time, we evolved that regulatory sandbox to be always on, so that firms could apply at any point throughout the year rather than on a cohort basis. And then we also further introduced the digital sandbox. And the digital sandbox is that real environment that enables testing, collaboration. We have academics. At the recent market abuse tech sprint, is one of the most quanti tech sprints I have ever sat through, between artificial intelligence and quantum physics being applied in the room. You really have access to the best data sets and the brightest minds working on really the trickiest problems. And that is amazing to see. And so the digital sandbox, again, after it was introduced on a pilot basis, we decided that the feedback we were getting from fintechs in particular was so positive that we wanted to make that an always-on service.
So it wasn't intended to be always on from the outset.
When you do something new for the first time in
You
the
don't know if it's
spirit
gonna
of
work.
innovation,
Yeah.
you try it out.
Yeah.
It's a pilot. You try it. You see how it goes. You see whether or not the industry warms to it. And I have had many fintechs approach me as I'm out and about and tell me that if it weren't for the access to the data that was available in the testing environment, that they wouldn't have been able to scale their business or finalize their business model. And so that feedback to me was very important, and it reminded me of the importance of data and why we should continue to make that service available. And so we enabled that, as well as the innovation pathways service that I described a little bit earlier. And that helped us give that advice and support to firms. And then something else that also happened along the way, you might recall the Khalifa review.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Khalifa review was really reminding us about that extra bit of focus on innovation and support. And that was a critical input into many of the decisions that we made to continue to invest in all of those services I just described.
It's interesting that your title is Chief Data Information and Innovation Officer. To your point about the sandbox and the sandbox data, how important is data to innovation, to your role? Is that like a separate part of the job, or is it that data is central to innovation in a way?
Data is absolutely central to what we do at the FCA. So when I joined the organization over 3 years ago, we had a small team. We have now grown the team from 300 individuals to nearly 600 over that period of time. So we've doubled the size of the team. We have technology directorates, we have data directorates, we have a new product development directorate, and we have the innovation department, which sits within the data or the digital and innovation directorate. So there's a lot of words in there, but suffice it to say that we have had a huge focus over the past 3 years since I've joined the FCA on transforming the FCA, having digital technology available. So we want to enable scale across the organization, getting the right intelligence. Actually, my title, I should clarify, is Chief Data Information and Intelligence Officer.
I apologize.
And no, that's okay, because the department name is Data Technology and Innovation, DTI. And the reason why the I is so important, and the I could be agnostic. It could be intelligence, it could be information, it could be innovation. There's lots of I words. But the really important thing is that we wanted to deliver the right data at the right time to the right place internally to the art of supervision and regulation. And so that is a huge focus of the team. And then in terms of the innovation work, if we zoom out possibly to an example, we did a global greenwashing tech sprint, and we did that in collaboration
This
with...
was to discourage greenwashing rather than encourage greenwashing, presumably.
Well, exactly, and to identify it.
Right.
Rather than discourage it. It's about seeking and finding. So the work that we did there brought in all sorts of global, international climate change, data sets, and we were able to look at all of the data in that environment to identify greenwashing that was happening in the market with some of the solutions that were developed in that tech sprint. So the data is really important, both in terms of the day-to-day, regulation activity, as well as how we support innovation.
Thank you. So if we think back 10 years to sort of 2014, when the Innovation Hub was first set up, what do you think are some of the most substantial changes that we've seen over the past decade? And I realize it's a huge question, and we could spend
a lot has changed.
Spend hours. But yeah, what feel like the most important or the biggest shifts over that time?
So technology is the simple answer. On my way here, I was actually delayed because in the underground, I was stopped by a group of 10-year-old boys that were raising money for their football club, and they had digital payments in their hand, and they were using mobile payments to collect a payment from me, which they negotiated up very well. By the way, it was very entrepreneurial. But I was interested to see what they would do when they had friction in the process. And I know that SumUp doesn't work with Amex. And so I paid with Amex. And they weren't perturbed by this. And they were able to troubleshoot the payments and work around it. And another child had on their phone a different way to do tap and pay. And so I really think that that's what's happened in the last 10 years is the evolution of, fintech, payments, mobile applications. Technology has evolved so much that we take it for granted. And so when I look at the past 10 years in terms of the work the FCA has done, the focus on helping fintech scale has been really exciting. I mean, we've seen unicorns such as Zilch. Zilch started testing with us in 2019 and scaled their product in 2020. They've raised over £11 million and reached 3 million customers. We also have worked with Notabene, a regtech firm, and they have worked with us in 2022 and scaling in 2023 to help firms with the travel rule. We've also worked with open banking fintechs like Finexos, doing credit risk analysis at a very sophisticated level, including using artificial intelligence and advanced analytics. So when we look at what's transformed over the last 10 years, we can really just step back and think about open banking, open finance, and the changes that have happened that enable customers to adapt technologies into their lifestyle, but also businesses to scale. And I had the opportunity to work for a fintech before I came to this particular role, a Welsh fintech. And that really transformed my perspective on consumer financial inclusion and how important it is for consumers to have choice in the market and the ability to, to have access to alternative sources of lending, particularly around identity services as well.
Thank you. I love that story about the 10-year-olds, not only because it's particularly appropriate when we're thinking about what's changed over the past 10 years, but also because of the way that demonstrates the way that young people in particular just internalize and, as you say, take for granted digital technologies that certainly didn't exist 20 years ago, and in some examples of what you were talking about probably didn't even exist 10 years ago. And I think we will continue to see that the young will continue to find or seek better ways of doing things. So one last quick question for you in this section. How do you navigate sort of regulating the market while sort of promoting innovation and technological experimentation? And you sort of touched on it a bit already, but, in your role as a regulator, what's the sort of balance between innovation, experimentation on the one hand, and on the other hand, sort of regulating and preventing market abuse or whatever on the other hand?
So for me, it's really exciting because I have the opportunity to do all of those things every day. In terms of the work that I do internally, we're able to connect data sets together. So we collect a lot of information, market information, we have firm-specific information, we have consumer complaints, we receive information directly into our supervision hub. We have all the supervisory data that we collect. I'm also responsible for the reg data system. Reg data collects both ad hoc and regular collections from the firms that we regulate, over 50,000 firms. We also collect supervisory data on behalf of the Bank of England and the PRA. And so we have a lot of data. And just as in every other role that I've been in the past that's focused on data, it's about connecting information and actually creating intelligence. And that intelligence is putting it in the hands where it needs to be. And then it's really about risk appetite and going after the really important harms. Right. And so like any role, you have to prioritize the really important risks. And so we do a lot of horizon scanning. We look at emerging technologies. We monitor the markets. We collect a lot of information, both broad and deep. We collaborate with international partners. We had fellow regulators in the office yesterday from abroad talking to us about emerging risks that they see. And through all of that helps us evolve and prioritize where to intervene. And then encouraging innovation is all about competitiveness and growth. So when we identify an opportunity to improve, we do. So one recent example was the changes that we made to the listings regime. We were able to make it easier for firms to raise capital, especially private firms. We've also created a few more innovations on financial infrastructure market, FMI sandbox. The digital security sandbox is another environment that allows firms to dynamically switch on and off policy testing. So we're keeping an eye all the time on where are the pain points, where are the things that the market has moved or something has changed, and firms are finding it difficult to grow or scale or attract capital. And so we listen to that feedback, and we work closely with, we have a few practitioner panels that works with large firms, a small business practitioner panel as well, consumer panels. So we're taking feedback and input all the time, and that helps us identify areas where we might want to innovate ourselves, as well as support innovation in the market.
Fascinating. Thank you. Well, we are going to take a very short break, and then we will talk about what the next 10 years of innovation could look like. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than ever, and that's why we want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn's Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers who are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people who matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/fintechinsider. That is linkedin.com/fintechinsider for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/fintechinsider and get started.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
Welcome back to Fintech Insider Insights, where I'm in conversation with the Financial Conduct Authority's Chief Data Information and Intelligence Officer, Jessica Rusu. Before the break, we talked about the first 10 years of innovation at the FCA, and now we'll look at what the future holds for the hub. So I suppose perhaps start with a broad question. As we see sort of new generations of fintechs emerging, maybe started by some of those 10-year-olds you met earlier, how do you think that the hub's role in supporting them might sort of evolve? Do you think there are going to be sort of themes like consumer protection, inclusion, sustainability, AI? Is it more of the same, or do you think there's going to be a shift in emphasis at all?
I think all of those are really important themes. As a CIO, something that I'm keenly aware of is the role that technology plays in financial services. So we're thinking a lot about the role of critical third parties and how financial services firms are interacting with these large technology providers. And it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves, because firms that are adopting new technologies have a decision to make, to build or to buy. To insource or to outsource. And some of those dynamics play out in different ways. And we are very alive to the risks of systemic type of risks. If perhaps one particular technology provider were to experience something that would limit their service availability. So there are those kind of dynamics to watch, the role that technology firms are playing and how they, in many cases, are entering the financial services market. So I think that's a very important trend. we've covered a lot about artificial intelligence. I'm interested as well in the intersection of artificial intelligence with quantum technology. And we've done a bit of research as well into quantum. It's an area we've been looking at for a while. And then in terms of consumer financial inclusion, I think there is a real growing trend where consumers are sort of shifting their risk appetite around how much information they are willing to share. So consumers are really, really ready to share all of their information with lots of technology firms, but then they get a little bit more nervous about sharing that information with other type of firms. And I think in many cases there are limits to this information sharing, and therefore I've been asked a number of times about, a national digital ID or digital identity services. And I've seen some really great propositions brought forward, for example, in the consumer financial inclusion tech sprint that we did in Glasgow a few months ago. And there were really brilliant fintech firms looking at ways that consumers could create their identity solutions through passporting and other sharing of informations, open finance type of solutions, so that they could get access to short-term loans, credit services, peer-to-peer lending. So there's a whole market there that's untapped, and we have to think about digital inclusion and exclusion and what that means for consumers in the market. So I think that's another really interesting space to watch.
It's interesting you mentioned the tech sort of companies earlier, and I think I'm not going to put you on the spot on this, but there's definitely a point at which regulators around the world may start having to think about the role that tech companies are playing in financial frauds, because their platforms are being exploited by criminals and others. And at some point, I think regulators may have to sort of look at that and say, we may need to actually get more collaboration. We may have to start enforcing certain things, because currently, obviously, the tech companies largely fall outside your remit because they're not directly involved in financial services. But if that gets abused, then I suppose there comes
and
a
we've
question.
been working closely as well with the ICO and the CMA and Ofcom as well through the Digital Regulatory Cooperation Forum, the DRCF. And what we do is talk about those sorts of issues, and sometimes it might fall outside our remit, but it will fall in another regulator's remit. So there's a lot of collaboration on that topic.
The FCA, in many ways, has been a standard bearer for regulators in financial services. There have been regulators elsewhere in the world that have learned from the FCA. To what extent do you now look at some of your international colleagues and learn from them? You said you had some of them in your offices, I think, this week or last week.
Absolutely.
Are there regulators you're looking at? Are there regulations you're looking at and saying, that's really interesting, we could maybe learn from that? Obviously, you're not going to tell us all of the regulations that are coming, but...
Yeah, so firstly, I'll say I've been really impressed over the past 3 years. I've had almost 100 different global regulators come through our office, and they want to talk to me about what I'm doing, and they come with a pen and paper and they ask me lots of questions.
Sounds very traditional, pen and paper.
So I still feel that we are world leading, and I don't think we've rested on our laurels in terms of what a regulator can do to keep up with technology and innovation. But at the same time, there's been a really interesting deepening collaboration. So the GFIN, Global Financial Innovation Network, has, I think, something like 93 global regulators participating, focusing on those tricky problems, whether it's crypto or AI or greenwashing, kind of looking at all of those emerging problems. So there's a lot of sharing and learning from each other. And I mentioned the greenwashing tech sprint, where we all came together from around the world, because it's a global problem that requires global solutions. And we do spend quite a lot of time on data as well, talking about taxonomies and interoperability, and talking about standards. And we are aware that firms are global, and they need to work with global regulators. So there is an awareness and a collaboration on that front.
Yeah, I think international standards are enormously helpful to companies and indeed consumers all around the world. because it's just so much easier to build systems that work.
Absolutely.
when there are standards. We talked 10, 15 minutes ago, you talked about some of the work you've been doing to try and sort of improve listings and so on. And a topic that's come up on this podcast a number of times is the sort of debate about big fintechs that are thinking of doing an IPO in New York, initial public offering in New York rather than London, and that London has been sort of losing share. Is that something that sort of worries the FCA? Do you think does it matter if firms go to the States to list British startups, or indeed startups from elsewhere in Europe? Does the FCA play a role in trying to sort of maintain London as a fintech hub, or is that sort of a bit beyond your remit?
Absolutely. I think that's really important for us. And it's not just the city, by the way. It's also Scotland FinTech, Northern FinTech. We have collaboration with Leeds and other regional players because we want to promote FinTech for the whole of the UK, not just in London, but specifically around firms' choice to list in New York versus in London. I mean, that's why we've done the listings change a few weeks ago, and we wanted to make it easier for firms to raise capital and simpler processing. So we're looking at all of those things, as well as thinking about the private market. So the private market, we've also done the Digital Security Sandbox and the FMI to try to enable all parts of the market to participate and grow in London.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. You mentioned the FMI in talking. I'm not sure all of our listeners will know what the FMI is.
It's the Financial Market Infrastructure.
Thank you. We get quite a few sort of budding entrepreneurs listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
People who work in financial services who've got this little idea at the back of their mind of, there's this thing I want to build. Or people who are, setting out on that sort of founder journey. Do you have any advice for founders who are thinking, or people are thinking of setting up a startup, or who've recently set up a startup, about how to sort of work with or engage the regulators?
Yeah, I would say as a first step to think about contacting the Innovation Pathway Service. There are a lot of helpful conversations that we can have with firms pre-authorization if they are at that stage. We can also put them in touch with coaches and a network that will help them and give them feedback on their business proposition. Once they have a more mature proposition, we would encourage them to apply either to the regulatory sandbox or to the digital sandbox. And what they can do there is just test the solution or the product with real consumers. So once they have that real test done, they can test both, am I able to be compliant and operate with the regulatory expectations in this market? And they'll also have proof that the product works. And they'll have data on the type of consumers and the take-up that they can get. So that testing is really very important, I think, in the scale-up process. And then once firms are kind of through the sandbox experience, we have what's called early and high growth oversight. And that, I think, is a market differentiator. So if a firm is thinking about why London or why New York, so sometimes firms get into trouble in those first couple of years. They're not really able to get past that startup phase into a grown-up operation. And so what I would say is special about the early and high growth oversight department at the FCA is that it's that extra level of supervision that really helps the firms as they're going through that journey. It lets them know if they're late or if they've missed something as part of their application process, or if they're at risk of falling foul of some of their requirements. And so I think that is a really special part of what the FCA can offer as well, because it's not done at the beginning, you get your VC investment, you're done. You really have to think about the whole journey and how you're going to scale your business and grow. And I think the FCA is catering for all of those life cycles and stages.
We're almost out of time. This has been fascinating. I'd happily talk to you all afternoon, but we don't have all afternoon. So imagine we were to do another podcast in 2034. It'll be our 2000th episode or something like that.
I'll be old then.
Well, we'll all be 10 years older. What will we be talking about then? What impact do you hope that the hub will have had over that decade? Will we be talking about the AI hub? What do you think we might be talking about in a decade?
In a decade, who knows what we'll be talking about? I'm sure we'll be talking about the role that technology plays. I think we'll see a super shift in technology firms and financial services firms. I think money will always be important. So I'm sure the financial services industry will still be here in 10 years. But I think what we'll really see is how some of the businesses that are scaling today will become the huge incumbents of the future. And so I think that's why the innovation and growth is so important, because without that investment today, we won't have our tomorrow in 2034.
I wonder how many of those 10-year-olds will be setting up
those
businesses.
10-year-olds will be in charge, for sure.
They will. Well, that wraps up our discussion. A massive thank you to Jessica for spending some of your time with us today. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us. How can people sort of connect with you and find out more about the work that you and your team are doing at the FCA?
Well, they can always reach out to us at fca.org.uk.
Brilliant. And you can find me, Benjamin Ensor, on LinkedIn. So thank you all so much for listening. If you've liked what you've heard, please do follow our podcast. Please give us a review. Let us know what you'd like to hear about in the future. If you want to join the conversation, find us on social media or search for 11FS or Fintech Insider, or email us at podcast@11fs.com. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
And goodbye.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.